Oh, really? Awesome. Yeah, well, I need the audio too. Like, it actually works to do it.
Oh, cool. No, I have a different thing, but my problem is that since the whole phone busted, it's just a lot, like, I can't even get it.
Even harder. Even harder. I think it was hard before. I think it's
This is a lot more I like about it. You know, they keep trying to make it so special with like connection and very
great benefits. Hey guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred. I'll be making a statement, and then my client, whose name I shall provide, will be making a statement. I'll be taking questions afterwards. She will not be taking any questions, and we'll state the reasons for that shortly. I'm here today with a very brave woman from Alabama who alleges that when she was a minor, that she was sexually assaulted by Roy Moore. She alleges that at the time of the alleged assault, Mr. Moore was a district attorney in Etowah County, Alabama. Mr. Moore subsequently became an Alabama Supreme Court justice and had the unique distinction of being twice removed from that court for ethical violations. This new accuser of Roy Moore is here with me today. Beverly Young Nelson has chosen to come forward because she thinks that it is important to share what she alleges was her experiences with Mr. Moore when she was 15 and 16 years old. Beverly, with some exceptions, has kept her secret for more than 40 years. She did disclose what she alleges occurred with Mr. Moore to some close family members. She did not, however, speak out publicly because she feared Mr. Moore and the power that he had. Today, however, inspired by Mr. Moore's other accusers, she has found the courage to break her silence. Beverly contacted me to enlist my help and support in coming forward publicly with what she stated were truthful statements. Beverly gave our law firm permission to speak to her family members, to whom she had previously disclosed what happened to her when she was a minor. We have spoken to Beverly's mother and sister. Her sister has indicated that within 2 years of the alleged incident, Beverly told her about what happened with Mr. Moore when Beverly was still a teenager, and that they discussed it numerous times over the years, because Beverly would become upset when she saw Mr. Moore on television, and it would trigger the memories of what he had allegedly done to her. We also spoke with Beverly's mother, who is 77 years old. She vividly recalls that approximately 4 years ago, Beverly told her what had happened when she was a child. Her mother told us that Beverly was a very truthful person and that she completely believed her. Her mother told us that she asked Beverly why she had not told her mother at the time. Beverly told her that Mr. Moore had said that no one would believe her, and Beverly was afraid of Mr. Moore. Beverly's mother told us that she told Beverly that, quote, "Your mother will always believe you," end quote. Beverly's sister also told us that she had no doubt that Beverly was telling the truth, and that the events with Mr. Moore continued to impact Beverly throughout the years. We also confirmed with John, her husband, who is here today, that before he and Beverly were married, that she told John what Mr. Moore had done to her, and that John had urged Beverly over the years to come forward and speak about what happened. Beverly is willing to testify under oath to the statement that she will be making today. We urge the United States Senate Judiciary Committee to hold a public hearing as soon as possible. Beverly is willing to voluntarily appear at such a hearing to testify under oath. She is willing to answer any questions that the senators might ask her relevant to her allegations against Mr. Moore. We believe that the Judiciary Committee should subpoena Mr. Moore to answer questions under oath regarding his alleged conduct with Beverly and the other accusers. Pending the United States Senate's decision as to whether a hearing will be held, Beverly has decided to decline interviews with the press. However, if the Senate does not schedule a hearing to be held within 2 weeks from today, then Beverly will answer questions in a different public forum. Mr. Moore's response to accusations of inappropriate behavior has been to deny, attack, and threaten to sue. We believe that since Mr. Moore is seeking a seat in the United States Senate, he should support testimony under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee so that the facts can be determined in an open forum and in a fair manner. Mr. Moore may attack me as bringing Beverly forward because I am a Democrat. I would point out that I did not contact Beverly. She contacted me. Further, I have a public record of attacking Democrats who are or have been elected officials when they have been accused of injustices against women. For example, I filed a lawsuit against Democratic Mayor Bob Filner of San Diego and publicly accused him of sexually harassing the city's communications director. As a result of the mediation of our lawsuit, Mayor Filner resigned as mayor. In addition, I publicly criticized Anthony Weiner, a former Democratic congressman, regarding the sexting scandal. I also went on record criticizing former President Clinton when it became clear that he had lied about Monica Lewinsky. When it comes to injustices, it makes no difference to me whether a politician is a Democrat or a Republican. Our client has shown extraordinary courage by coming forward against an extremely powerful politician with powerful allies. She feels that it is her duty to speak out at this time, and we applaud her courage. Move over a little, please, to the.
My name is Beverly Young Nelson. I was born on November 14, 1961, in Santa Maria, California. My husband John and I have been married for 13 years. He has taken time off from work as a truck driver to be here with me today, and I thank him for that. When I was 15 years old, I began working after school. I was attending Gadsden High School. I worked at the old Hickory House, which was on East Meagan Boulevard, off of Highway 431 in Gadsden. I worked there after school as a waitress. Some nights I worked until 7 p.m. and other nights until 10 p.m. Mr. Roy Moore was a regular customer. He came in almost every night, and he would stay until closing time. He sat at the counter in the same seat night after night, and I remember exactly where he sat. Mr. Moore was an adult. He was much older than I was. I knew that he was the district attorney in Etowah County. I did not understand what that meant, but I did know that he was an important person, and I always treated him with respect. When he was at the restaurant, he would speak to me and would sometimes pull the ends of my long hair as I walked by him. I had red hair down to my waist. He would compliment me on my looks, and I did not think anything of it. I did nothing to encourage his flirtatious behavior. I was accustomed to men flirting with me because I was a well-developed and competed in beauty pageants. I did not attach any significance to Mr. Moore's behavior towards me, and I did not respond to any of Mr. Moore's flirtatious behavior for two reasons. First, I had a boyfriend. Second, if I had not had a boyfriend, I was not interested in having a dating or sexual relationship with a man that was twice my age. I turned 16 November the 14th, 1977. About a month later, I received my yearbook from Southside High School, where I spent my freshman and my sophomore years. I happened to bring my yearbook to work with me to the restaurant on December the 22nd, 1977. I put it down. At the end of the counter. Mr. Moore happened to notice it, and he asked me if he could write in my yearbook, and I felt flattered, and I said yes. He wrote in my yearbook as follows: to a sweeter, more beautiful girl. I could not say Merry Christmas. Christmas 1977. Love, Roy Moore, Old Hickory House. And it signed it Roy Moore, D.A. I took the yearbook home with me at the end of my shift that day, and I felt honored that Mr. Moore, who was such an important person, would write in my book. A week or two later, I was working at the restaurant, and my shift ended at 10 o'clock when the restaurant closed. It was a cold night, and I went outside to wait for my boyfriend to pick me up and drive me home. My boyfriend was late, and Mr. Moore exited the restaurant at the same time as I did. He noticed that my boyfriend was not there, and he offered me a ride home. I trusted Mr. Moore because he was a district attorney. I thought that he was simply doing something nice by offering to drive me home. I did not want to wait outside in the cold, so I agreed. I wanted to call my boyfriend, but this was way back before cell phones. I had no way to contact him. My home was only about 2.5 miles away. I planned to call my boyfriend after I got home to let him know that I had gotten a ride and that there was no need for him to pick me up. Mr. Moore was wearing brown hush puppies on his feet. He drove a 2-door car. I believe that it was an old car, but I do not recall the model. I got into his car in the passenger seat, and he began driving. I thought he would get on the highway, but instead he drove to the back of the restaurant. I was not immediately alarmed, as there was an exit from the back of the restaurant to the street, and he could drive there to my house without getting on the highway. However, instead of driving to the street, he stopped the car. He stopped the car and he parked his car in between the dumpster and the back of the restaurant, where there were no lights. The area was dark and it was deserted. I was alarmed, and I immediately asked him what he was doing. Instead of answering my questions, Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me and putting his hands on my breast. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and he locked it so I could not get out. I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop. But instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. I continued to struggle. I was determined that I was not going to allow him to force me to have sex with him. I was terrified. He was also trying to pull my shirt off. I thought that he was going to rape me. I was twisting, and I was struggling, and I was begging him to stop. I had tears running down my face. At some point, he gave up. And he then looked at me and he told me, he said, "You're just a child." And he said, "I am the district attorney of Etowah County. And if you tell anyone about this, no one will ever believe you." He finally allowed me to open the door, and I either fell out or he pushed me out. I was on the ground as he pulled out of the parking area behind the restaurant. The passenger door was still open as he burned rubber, pulling away, leaving me laying there on this cold concrete in the dark. I got up and I tried to pull myself together as I was making my way to the front of the restaurant when my boyfriend arrived. It was late, it was dark, and I did not say anything to him as to what had occurred, as he had a very violent temper. And I was afraid that he would do something that would get him into trouble. When I got home, I went to my room, and the following morning, my neck was black and blue and purple. In the days following, I covered the bruising on my neck with makeup. I did not tell anyone about what had happened. I was scared. I felt that if I told anyone that Mr. Moore would do something to me or my family, and I decided to keep what happened to myself. The day after Mr. Moore assaulted me, I called the restaurant and I quit my job. I never went back there again. About 2 years later, I told my younger sister what Mr. Moore did to me. About 4 years ago, I told my mother finally what happened. Before I married my husband, John, I told him what Mr. Moore had done to me. My husband and I supported Donald Trump for president. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the Republicans or the Democrats. It has everything to do with Mr. Moore's sexual assault when I was a teenager. I thought that I was Mr. Moore's only victim. I would probably have taken what Mr. Moore did to me to my grave had it not been for the courage of 4 other women that were willing to speak out about their experiences with Mr. Moore. Their courage has inspired me to overcome my fear. Mr. Moore attacked me when I was a child. I did nothing to deserve this sexual attack. I was frightened by his position and his power, and I am coming forward today to let Mr. Moore to know that he no longer has any power over me, and I no longer live in fear of him.
Before I take questions, we have something to show you. The first is going to be a kind of a portrait of her that was done at Six Flags. I guess that's Six Flags Magic Mountain when she was about 16.
I was 16.
Okay, let's stand up for a minute. The table a little. Okay. All right. So you can take one end of this and I'll take the other. And let's just hold it up like this. Okay. That way. Okay, and then we have something else to show you, and that is her yearbook, in which Mr. Moore's signature appears because he signed her yearbook, and we have provided you with copies, I think, of these. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is what we gave you as a copy, wherein he says, he signed it to her. We didn't give her name, but he said, "To a sweeter, more beautiful girl, I could not say Merry Christmas. Christmas 1977." You can hold the other end, please. Thank you. Love, Ray Moore. Oh, excuse me. Love, Roy Moore, D.A., 122277 Old Hickory House. That's the yearbook.
With my name.
And her name is on the outside, so that is her yearbook, Beverly Young, which was her maiden name. And also inside, there is a photo of Beverly. And that you were about, what, 15 or 16?
15.
You would be 15. Let's find that photo. I think it's on page 86, 87. And so that's a photo of her in here. Right here. Okay, so right here, you could point to that photo if you would, please. Without, okay, there. That's Beverly in the yearbook. is some of the evidence that we have. Okay, thank you very much. And maybe why don't you make yourself comfortable. Okay, there you go. Want to push up a little?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We don't need that. All right, so I'll be happy to take questions.
Gloria, can you walk through how you contacted her?
Yes, as I indicated in my statement, she contacted me.
Ms. Allred, can we ask you also...
As, you know, thousands of women and men have over the 41 years that I've been practicing law.
Ms. Allred, can I ask you, I'm sure you heard over the weekend Roy Moore said about some other accusers, to think that a grown woman would wait 40 years to come right before election to bring charges is absolutely unbelievable. Your response to that?
Well, I'm shocked that he, as a former Supreme Court Justice of Alabama, would be shocked that any person who is an adult survivor of child sexual abuse would wait a long time to tell anyone. As a matter of fact, because we've represented many adult survivors of child sexual abuse, sometimes they never tell anyone for reasons of concerns about victim blaming, victim shaming, not being believed, perhaps being attacked, having to explain to other family members. There are just many reasons. And it's really rather concerning that he, as a former justice, would not know that or be aware of that. So that's my response. Be happy to take any other questions.
Has Ms. Nelson had any contact with Roy Moore since the incident?
No. No, none.
Does she still live in Alabama?
She's still a resident of Alabama, that's correct.
The Moore campaign just put out a statement calling you a sensationalist leading a witch hunt, saying that you're only around to create a spectacle. Can you respond to that?
I think I have responded to that with my statement. And generally, when name-calling is involved, I always say that's usually because the person does not have a good argument on the merits against what I said. And that's kind of, many people resort to either four-letter words or name-calling or personal ad hominem attacks, characterizations of people when they don't have a good argument against what was said. So, if that's the best that he has, well, Mr. Moore, as they say in some parts of this country, you got some splaining to do. And hopefully that will be before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee if you dare to come and take the oath and testify under oath, truthfully. If you have nothing to hide, and you deny everything, and I notice he hasn't denied what my client, Beverly, has said, well, then do so under oath, sir. I challenge you to do that. Beverly is ready, willing, and able. Let's see if the Senate Judiciary Committee will have that hearing and whether former Judge, former Justice Roy Moore will testify under oath. Yes, sir.
Could you please give us the date again on which this assault occurred?
Yes, I do. We have copies, did you? Pardon me? Yeah, we have copies of our statement, and we're happy to provide one to you right afterwards. Thank you, sir.
Gloria, what's your response to the many Republicans in Washington who refuse to take a stand against Roy Moore in light of these allegations?
Well, my focus is on a hearing where Beverly and Mr. Moore testify under oath. So I'm not going to engage in a political discussion about what other Republicans or even Democrats should say or do. Let's get to the truth, and let's have it under oath.
Some Republicans have responded to the allegations saying that if they're true, Moore should step aside. What would constitute proving they're true beyond his statement and reporting that's going on to us?
Well, of course, a woman's word, a person who alleges that she is a victim, if she is testifying in a legal proceeding, that is evidence. Okay. Now, the trier of fact, whether that would be in a court of law or if the members of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee would like to convene and determine what the facts are after such testimony, then we would welcome that.
Ms. Allred, obviously, Mr. Moore is not the only high-profile politician to be accused of sexual misconduct. Can you speak to an incident involving Rosalind Corrigan and George?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Regarding who?
Rosalind Corrigan.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have no comment on that today.
Have you been contacted by other women regarding Roy Moore?
The question is, have I been contacted by other women regarding Roy Moore? No comment.
Is there an exact date here? It says December 22nd, 1977 when Roy Moore came to the restaurant.
Well, whatever dates that we inserted into the press statement that Beverly authorized to be inserted are the dates that we stand by. These are the dates in which she believes that incidents happened with Mr. Moore. When I say incidents, I mean, for example, his signing her yearbook as well.
Does Mrs. Nelson want him to step down?
Ms. Beverly would like to be able to testify under oath, and then we will see what the decisions are by Mr. Moore and by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Hopefully, the right thing will happen after there is testimony.
Can you say what Ms. Nelson's profession is today and what she's been doing since the incident?
She is a businesswoman.
Her own business?
Pardon me?
Her own business?
I have no further detail to offer on that.
Can you say anything about her political history, who she voted for in the recent election, whether she's been in contact with the campaign of Mr. Jones?
I can only say what I said, or what she said, rather, in her statement, which is that she and her husband were supporters of Donald Trump. Other than that, we have nothing to add about that. Anything further?
She still lives in Alabama?
But she resides in Alabama.
Has Beverly been in touch with the other 4 women?
No, she has not been in touch with the other 4 women. And they have not been in touch with her.
Will her family be able to speak out about this as well?
Well, I don't represent her mother and sister. I have reason to believe that her sister would not be doing interviews at all. And I do not expect that her mother would, but I mean, anybody can change their mind at any time. I do not expect her sister to change her mind. Anything further?
Gloria, you said earlier that Ms. Nelson and her husband supported Trump and voted for him. Do her and her husband still support President Trump?
I don't have any comment on whether they still support President Trump or not.
Is there any
And of course, it's not relevant to me as to whether she should be a client of mine or not.
Was there any incident with Mr. Moore at the diner prior to that night that was just discussed? With her or anyone else?
We're not going to comment on whether anyone else ever had an incident with Mr. Moore. She described in her statement the only touching that occurred, the touching of her hair, her long red hair, as she walked by when he was in the diner. And then, of course, the incident she described on the night in question. So that was it. Okay. Anything further?
And why the Senate Judiciary Committee?
I'm sorry, I can't hear your question.
Why the Senate Judiciary Committee? What exactly are you looking for the Judiciary Committee to do?
What am I looking for at the Senate Judiciary Committee? What I'm looking for is a form of justice to the extent that's possible in the political process, not possible in the legal process in the next month, but it is possible in the political process. Well, I'd like them to schedule a hearing, and I would like them to invite her to testify under oath, which she voluntarily will do. She does not need to be subpoenaed. She's volunteering to do that. And we would like them to invite and subpoena Mr. Moore to that hearing, to be held expeditiously, as soon as possible.
What kind of criminal and civil options do you have at this point beyond the legislative option?
She's not exploring any civil option, nor is she exploring any criminal option. This is her focus, is the hearing.
Gloria, with Ms. Nelson as a Trump supporter, does she hope that the president takes a stand against Roy Moore and insists that he step down?
She is only concerned right now with being able to testify under oath at a hearing.
Could you tell us how Mrs. Nelson was able to hold this in for so long, all these years?
It's not easy. And again, with the exception that she did tell her sister, her mother, and her soon-to-be husband, John. It's very difficult to disclose what she alleges happened between her and Mr. Moore. As you can see, it had an impact on her today, even some 40 years later. It's painful to have to keep that secret inside. Anything further?
After the incident, did she ever see Mr. Moore again, other than on television?
No. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, she never saw him again except on television. Never wished to see him again, either. Okay, anything further? All right, I'm going to thank you for coming today. You have extras? You don't have a copy of the statement. Why don't you? You can see this, my paralegal right here, and he will be happy to provide you one.
Yeah.
Which one? The one of her? Where he signed. Okay, that's a different place. Wait,